I'm Seraphina, 28, and 3 years ago I thought winning $620 0 inches the lottery would be the best thing that ever happened to me. I was wrong. Within hours of telling my family, my parents sat me down and delivered an ultimatum that shattered everything I believed about blood loyalty: give half my winnings to my sister Cordelia or pack my bags and never come back. They claimed it was fair since Cordelia had student loans and I didn't. What they didn't know was that I'd been secretly recording our family conversations for months, documenting years of favoritism that would eventually destroy them all. But before we dive into how I made my entire family pay for decades of treating me like a second-class citizen, I need to know, where are you watching from today? If you're here for some serious family karma and justice being served, ice cold, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild. Trust me, by the end you'll understand why sometimes blood isn't thicker than water and why the golden child doesn't always get to keep their crown. Let's get into it. Growing up in suburban Michigan, I always knew I was the spare tire in the Hartwell family garage. Cordelia, my older sister by 3 years, was the shining star homecoming queen, valedictorian, full scholarship to Northwestern University. Everything came easy to her, and our parents, Margaret and Richard Hartwell, made sure everyone knew it. While Cordelia got a brand new Honda Civic for her 16th birthday, I got a lecture about responsibility when I asked for driving lessons. When she wanted to study abroad in Paris junior year, Dad took out a second mortgage without hesitation. When I needed $200 for SAT prep books, I was told to get creative and find the money myself. The pattern was so consistent, it became my normal. Family dinners revolved around Cordelia's achievements, her boyfriend's medical school acceptance, her internship at a prestigious law firm. I learned early to sit quietly, nod appreciatively, and never expect the spotlight to swing my way. After high school, while Cordelia was living her best life in Chicago, I stayed local and worked my way through community college. No family financial support, no care packages, no weekend visits. I studied dental hygiene because it was practical, affordable, and guaranteed employment. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. By 25, I'd moved into a modest apartment, bought a reliable used car, and built a quiet but stable life. I worked at Dr. Peterson's dental practice, saved religiously, and honestly believed I'd found my place in the world. My relationship with my family was distant but functional. Surface-level conversations, obligatory holiday appearances, and zero expectations of emotional support. Cordelia, meanwhile, had graduated law school, landed a position at a downtown Detroit firm, and was planning an elaborate wedding to her medical resident boyfriend, Trevor. The wedding alone cost $40,000, every penny funded by our parents, who bragged about it to anyone who'd listen. I wasn't bitter exactly. I'd accepted my role as the practical, invisible daughter. The one who sent thoughtful birthday cards that went unacknowledged, who offered help during family crises that was politely declined, who existed in the background of every family photo. What I didn't realize was how much documentation I was unconsciously collecting. Text message threads where Mom asked Cordelia about her day but never me. Family group chats where my messages went unread while Cordelia's got immediate responses. Photos from family gatherings where I was consistently cropped out or positioned at the edges. The lottery ticket that changed everything was purchased on a Tuesday, after a particularly frustrating day at work. A difficult patient, a broken piece of equipment, and Dr. Peterson's subtle criticism about my communication skills had left me drained. I stopped at the corner gas station, bought a Diet Coke, and on impulse added a Mega Millions ticket. I forgot about it completely until Friday, when local news announced a winning ticket had been sold at Murphy's gas station on Riverside Drive. Even then, I almost threw the ticket away without checking. But something made me pull up the numbers on my phone, and that's when my hands started shaking. 415-233-952. Mega Ball 18. Every single number matched. The walk to the lottery office felt surreal. The paperwork, the photos, the check ceremony, all of it passed in a blur. $620,000 after taxes. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More money than would change everything. I should have kept it secret. Should have quietly invested it. Maybe bought a house secured my future without fanfare. But there was this tiny, hopeful part of me that thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that finally made my parents proud. The achievement that would earn me a spot in family conversations, a reason for them to brag about their younger daughter too. So I called a family dinner. Cooked lasagna from scratch, bought wine, set the table with Mom's good china. When everyone arrived, I waited until dessert to make my announcement. The initial reaction was everything I'd hoped for. Gasps of amazement, congratulations, genuine excitement. For about 10 minutes, I was the center of attention in a way I'd never experienced. Mom hugged me, Dad shook my hand, even Cordelia seemed genuinely happy. But then the questions started. What was I planning to do with the money? Had I thought about investing? Did I understand the tax implications? Each question felt less like curiosity and more like an interrogation, and I watched my moment of triumph slowly transform into another opportunity for family guidance. That's when Dad cleared his throat and suggested we move to the living room for a family discussion. The living room felt different that night. The same brown leather couch where I'd done homework as a kid, the same family photos on the mantel, but suddenly everything carried weight. Mom and Dad positioned themselves across from me, while Cordelia curled up in Dad's old recliner, and I immediately sensed this wasn't going to be the celebration I'd imagined. Seraphina, Dad, began using his serious voice, the one reserved for major announcements and disciplinary conversations. We need to talk about responsibility and family obligations. I felt my stomach drop, but I nodded for him to continue. Your sister has $180 0 inches student loan debt from law school. Mom chimed in her tone, suggesting this was somehow my problem to solve. She's been struggling with payments, and Trevor's residency salary barely covers their basic expenses. Okay, I said slowly, still not understanding where this was heading. Dad leaned forward, hands clasped. We think the fair thing, the right thing, would be for you to share this blessing with your sister. Half would completely eliminate her debt and give her the fresh start she deserves. The words hit me like ice water. $310, 000. I managed to whisper. It's not like you need all that money, Mom added quickly. You have a stable job, low expenses, no debt. Cordelia has been working toward this career her whole life, and this could secure her future. I looked at Cordelia, expecting her to protest, to say this was ridiculous, that she couldn't accept such a massive gift. Instead, she was nodding thoughtfully, as if they were discussing splitting a dinner check. I mean, I would pay you back eventually, she said, though her tone suggested this was more theoretical than practical. Once the practice gets established and Trevor finishes his residency. This is insane, I said, finding my voice. I bought that ticket with my money. I won this lottery. Why should I give away half of it? The room went silent, and I saw my parents exchange a look, the same look they'd shared my entire childhood, when I'd done something disappointing. Because that's what family does, Dad said firmly. We support each other. We share our good fortune. When have you ever shared anything with me?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "When Cordelia needed college money, did you ask her to share the burden? When she wanted that expensive wedding, did anyone suggest splitting the cost with me?" Mom's face hardened. "That's completely different, and you know it. Education and marriage are investments in the future. This is just luck. Luck that happened to me, I shot back. My ticket, my numbers, my win. Your attitude is exactly why you've always struggled in this family," Mom said, her voice sharp with disappointment. "Everything is always about you, what you want, what you think you deserve. Your sister has worked hard for everything she has, and I haven't." I was standing now, years of frustration finally boiling over. I put myself through school, got a job, built a life, without asking for anything from anyone in this family. But suddenly I win some money and I'm supposed to hand it over because Cordelia made expensive choices. "Those weren't choices," Dad interjected. "That was investing in her potential. Law school, marrying a doctor, these are the foundations of a successful life. Unlike my pathetic existence as a dental hygienist." "No one said pathetic," Mom replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But let's be realistic about your prospects versus your sister's." That's when Cordelia finally spoke up, and her words cut deeper than anything our parents had said. "Sarah, you've always been jealous of me. This is just another example of you wanting to keep something good for yourself instead of thinking about what's best for the family." Jealous, I laughed bitterly. "You think I'm jealous of someone who can't pay her own bills. I think you're selfish," she replied calmly. "I think you've always resented that things came easier for me, and now you want to punish the whole family by hoarding money you didn't even earn." "I bought the ticket. With what, $5? Dad scoffed. "This isn't about earning anything. This is about character. And right now, yours is sorely lacking." The conversation continued for another hour, but the conclusion was inevitable. My parents had made their decision before I'd even walked in the door. Either I gave Cordelia $310,000, or I was no longer welcome in their home or their lives. "You have until Sunday to decide," Mom said as they prepared to leave. "But understand that this choice will define how we see you for the rest of our lives." Cordelia hugged our parents goodbye, then turned to me with what she probably thought was a sympathetic expression. "I hope you make the right choice, Sarah. Family is more important than money." After they left, I sat in my empty apartment staring at the lottery check on my coffee table. $620. 0, 0, 0. That was supposed to be my freedom, had somehow become the price of my family's love, a love that apparently came with conditions I'd never known existed. But as I replayed the conversation, something else began to crystallize. The casual way they discussed my future, the assumption that my life was less valuable than Cordelia's, the complete dismissal of my feelings and rights. This wasn't about fairness or family loyalty. This was about maintaining the hierarchy that had defined our family for decades. And that's when I realized I had a choice to make, but it wasn't the one they thought they were offering me. That weekend changed everything. Instead of agonizing over their ultimatum, I did something that would have shocked my family. I got methodical. Years of feeling like the forgotten daughter had taught me to be observant, and suddenly all those observations had purpose. I started with the family group chat history on my phone. Screenshot after screenshot of messages where Cordelia's texts got immediate responses while mine were ignored for days. Birthday announcements where hers generated paragraphs of celebration while mine earned a generic happy birthday emoji. Invitations to family events where the details were shared privately with Cordelia while I got last-minute notifications. But the real treasure trove was in my old bedroom at my parents' house. Sunday morning while they were at church, I used my emergency key to conduct what I called evidence gathering. In my old desk drawer, I found years of report cards, award certificates, and school photos, all of Cordelia's. Mine were nowhere to be found. The family photo wall told the same story, dozens of pictures featuring Cordelia prominently while I was either absent or positioned where I could be easily cropped out. The financial records were even more revealing. I photographed bank statements Dad had left on his desk, mortgage papers, and a manila folder labeled Cordelia's Education Fund that contained detailed spreadsheets tracking every dollar spent on her schooling. The total was staggering, $287,000 over 7 years, including undergraduate law school living expenses and even a semester abroad in London I'd never heard about. There was no folder for my education expenses because there weren't any. But the real smoking gun was in Mom's jewelry box, a hiding place she'd used since I was a child. Behind her pearl necklace was a handwritten note in Dad's familiar script: "Emergency fund for C's wedding minus $50K max. Tell S we're tapped out if she asks for anything." The note was dated 2 years ago, long before any engagement announcements. I photographed everything, uploaded it to a secure cloud account, and began building what I would later call the Seraphina files. A comprehensive documentation of 3 decades of systematic favoritism and emotional abuse, disguised as family dynamics. Now here's where things get really interesting, because while I was playing detective, my family was making moves of their own. And if you're wondering whether this story gets more twisted, just wait until you hear what I discovered about Cordelia's perfect life. But first, are you Team Seraphina, or do you think I should have just handed over the money for family peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this next part is going to make you question everything you think you know about golden children and family loyalty. Monday morning brought a text from Cordelia. "Hey Sarah, just wondering if you've thought more about our conversation. Trevor and I looked at some houses this weekend, and there's this perfect place in Birmingham that would be amazing with a fresh start. Love you." The casual entitlement was breathtaking. She was already spending my money in her head, planning her upgraded life while assuming I'd fall in line like always. But instead of anger, I felt something much more dangerous: clarity. I called in sick to work and spent the day doing research. LinkedIn profiles, social media deep dives, public records searches. What I found painted a very different picture of Cordelia's struggling life. Her law firm salary was $95,000, hardly poverty level. Trevor's residency paid $55,000. Together they were earning $150,000 annually in a city where the median household income was $65,000. Their apartment was a luxury high-rise in downtown Detroit, rent $2,800 per month. Their social media showed regular expensive dinners, weekend trips to Chicago, and a designer wardrobe that cost more than my annual clothing budget. The student loan story got more interesting when I accessed Cordelia's social media history. A post from 6 months ago showed her celebrating paying off Trevor's undergraduate debt with a surprise inheritance from his grandmother. Another post from last year featured her excitement about a $15,000 bonus from work that she'd used for a vacation to Italy. If she had $180 debt and was struggling so desperately, where was this money coming from? And why hadn't our parents mentioned Trevor's inheritance or Cordelia's bonus when they were painting their picture of financial hardship? I dug deeper into public records and found something that made my blood run cold. 3 months ago, Richard and Margaret Hartwell had taken out a $75,000 home equity loan. The application, which I found through a connection at the bank where I kept my checking account, listed the purpose as home improvements, but their house hadn't been improved. I'd been there just last week for the lottery dinner, and everything looked exactly the same as it had for the past decade. A quick search of financial records showed a $75,000 deposit into Cordelia and Trevor's joint account 6 weeks ago, followed immediately by a $65,000 payment to Cordelia's student loan servicer and a $10,000 transfer to a savings account labeled House Down Payment Fund. My parents had already given Cordelia the money they were now demanding I provide. They'd mortgaged their retirement to pay her debts, then sat in my living room lying about her financial situation to extract even more money from my lottery win. But why? If they'd already solved her problem, why the elaborate charade about family obligation and sharing my blessing? The answer came in a phone call I overheard Tuesday evening. I'd driven to their house to think about their offer, but really to plant a small recording device I'd ordered online. The conversation I captured would have been comical if it wasn't so devastating. "She's being incredibly selfish about this," Mom was saying. "After everything we've done for her, she can't even help her own sister." "We raised her better than this," Dad replied. "I don't understand where this entitled attitude comes from." "Maybe we should tell her about the loan," Cordelia's voice chimed in. "If she knows we already helped, she might be more willing to contribute." "Absolutely not," Mom said firmly. "That would only give her an excuse to be even more stubborn. Besides, this isn't about the money anyway. This is about teaching her that family comes first and that she can't just coast through life expecting to keep everything for herself." "Exactly," Dad agreed. "She's never contributed anything meaningful to this family. The least she can do is share this windfall. And honestly," Cordelia added, "it's not like she has any real expenses or responsibilities. What's she going to do with $620? Buy a slightly bigger apartment and a newer car. We could actually use this money to build something important." The recording device captured another 20 minutes of conversation, but I'd heard enough. This wasn't about Cordelia's student loans or financial hardship. This was about maintaining their established hierarchy, ensuring that even when life threw me an unexpected blessing, I would still remain subordinate to my sister's needs and dreams. They weren't asking me to share my good fortune. They were demanding I fund their continued narrative that Cordelia's life mattered more than mine. That's when I realized the lottery win wasn't just changing my bank account, it was revealing the true nature of my family. And what I saw was uglier than I'd ever imagined. Wednesday morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting my family with the evidence I'd gathered, I decided to let them dig their own graves deeper. I called Mom and asked if we could meet for lunch to discuss the situation. We met at Olive Garden, her choice, because she loved feeling sophisticated ordering wine with her breadsticks. She arrived 15 minutes late, kissed my cheek with the same theatrical affection she'd always reserved for public displays, and immediately launched into what I now recognized as a carefully rehearsed speech. "Sweetheart, I hope you've had time to really think about what family means." She began cutting her salad with precise movements. "Your father and I have been talking, and we want you to know that we understand this is a big decision. But we also need you to understand that some choices define who we are as people." I nodded sympathetically, playing the role of the conflicted daughter. "I have been thinking about it, Mom. A lot." "Good," she said, visibly relaxing, "because Cordelia called this morning in tears. She's been so stressed about these loans, and knowing that relief is so close but uncertain. Well, it's just heartbreaking. I can imagine." I replied, remembering the $65,000 payment I'd discovered. It must be really hard for her. It is. And you know, sweetheart, I've been thinking about your future too. You're 28 now, and while your job is adequate, you're never going to build real wealth as a dental hygienist. But if you help Cordelia now when her practice is established and Trevor is a full doctor, they'll be in a position to help you later. The audacity was breathtaking. She was literally asking me to invest in my sister's future on the promise of eventual scraps from their success. That's an interesting way to think about it, I said carefully. Like a family investment strategy. Exactly. Mom's face lit up. See, this is why I knew you'd come around. You're smart enough to see the bigger picture. But I do have some concerns, I continued. What if something happens to Cordelia's career? What if the investment doesn't pay off the way we hope? Mom waved dismissively. Don't be silly. Cordelia has always been successful at everything she's tried. She's not like... She caught herself before finishing the sentence, but we both knew what she meant. Not like me. That's not what I was going to say, Mom replied quickly, though her flushed cheeks suggested otherwise. I just meant that Cordelia has a proven track record of making smart decisions, like taking on $180 0 inches student debt. That wasn't debt, that was an investment in her future. And it's already paying off. Her starting salary at the firm is excellent, and Trevor's residency is just the beginning of his earning potential. I decided to test how deep the lies went. It must be nice for them to have such good prospects, especially with how expensive everything is right now. I imagine even with their combined income, the loan payments must be crushing. Oh, they are, Mom said earnestly. They're barely scraping by. In fact, we've had to help them several times just with basic expenses. Really, I had no idea things were that tight for them.
We didn't want to worry you, Mom replied, clearly pleased with her own generosity.
But yes, we've been supporting them however we can. That's what family does. The conversation continued for another hour, with Mom painting increasingly elaborate pictures of Cordelia's financial struggles and my moral obligation to solve them. She spoke about sacrifice and family bonds, about the importance of lifting each other up, and the satisfaction that comes from generous hearts. What she didn't mention was the $75,000 home equity loan, the payments they'd already made, or the fact that Cordelia's struggling lifestyle included $1,000 handbags and weekend spa trips. By the time we said goodbye, I had enough recorded evidence to expose every lie they'd told. But more importantly, I had something else, absolute clarity about what I needed to do. That evening, I called 3 people who would become crucial to my plan. First was my cousin Jake, a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud. Second was my college friend Maria, who worked in estate planning and financial management. Third was my former roommate Casey, who had become a successful social media consultant. I explained my situation to each of them, shared the evidence I'd gathered, and asked for their professional help with a project I was calling Operation Golden Child. They all agreed immediately, partly because they were horrified by my family's behavior, but mostly because they'd witnessed years of my treatment and were eager to see some justice served. Jake would handle the deeper financial investigation and legal implications. Maria would help me structure my money in ways that would protect it from family pressure while maximizing its growth potential. Casey would document everything for potential public exposure, because I had a feeling this story was going to get much bigger than a private family dispute. Thursday morning, I received a text from Dad. Your mother said you had a good conversation yesterday. We're proud of you for making the mature choice. Come for dinner Sunday and we'll work out the logistics. They were so confident in their manipulation, so certain that I would fall in line like always, that they'd already started planning my surrender. Dad had even included Cordelia and Trevor in the text thread, as if my compliance was a foregone conclusion. Cordelia responded immediately, so excited I already found the perfect financial advisor to help us make sure the money is invested properly. This is going to change everything, Trevor chimed in. Really appreciate this, Sarah. We'll make sure to pay it forward when we're in a position to help family in the future. The casual way they discussed spending my money, their assumption that I would simply hand over $310,000 with a smile, revealed everything I needed to know about their respect for me as a person. But I had one more test to conduct before Sunday's dinner. One final confirmation that would either validate my plan or force me to reconsider everything. Friday afternoon, I called Cordelia directly. "Hey sis," I said, injecting false warmth into my voice. "I wanted to talk to you privately before Sunday. Of course, I'm so glad you're coming around on this. I know it feels like a big sacrifice, but you're literally changing our entire future." "That's actually what I wanted to discuss," I said. "I want to make sure I understand exactly how this money will be used. You mentioned student loans, but I want to be confident that this is really the best use of such a large amount." "Oh, absolutely," Cordelia replied eagerly. "The loans are crushing us. We're paying almost $2,000 a month just in minimums, and the interest is ridiculous. This would eliminate all of that and free up our cash flow for actually building wealth." $2,000 a month. Wow, that really is a lot. How do you manage that on top of rent and everything else? Honestly, we barely do. We've had to cut back on everything. No vacations, no eating out, no shopping unless it's absolutely necessary. It's been really hard adjusting our lifestyle. I thought about the Italy vacation photos, the designer clothes, the expensive dinners I'd seen documented across her social media. "I'm sure it has been," I said sympathetically. "Well, I'm glad I can help. See you Sunday." "Absolutely, and Sarah, thank you. This really means everything to us." After hanging up, I sat quietly in my car for several minutes. Not because I was conflicted about my decision, I'd moved far past that, but because I was amazed by the sheer scope of their deception. Every conversation, every emotional appeal, every guilt trip had been built on fabricated evidence and outright lies. They weren't asking me to help family in crisis. They were asking me to fund their upgraded lifestyle while maintaining the pretense that I should be grateful for the opportunity to serve them. Sunday's dinner was going to be very different from what they expected. Sunday arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly as I drove to my childhood home for what I knew would be the last family dinner I'd ever attend. I'd spent Saturday finalizing my preparations, transferring money to protected accounts, securing legal documentation, and rehearsing the speech that would end my relationship with the Hartwells forever. I arrived precisely on time, carrying a bottle of expensive wine and wearing the biggest smile I could manage. Mom hugged me enthusiastically at the door. Dad clapped my shoulder with what he probably thought was paternal pride, and Cordelia practically bounced with excitement as she showed me the house listings she'd printed out. "Trevor couldn't make it," she explained as we gathered in the living room. "Emergency at the hospital. But he's so grateful for what you're doing." "I'm sure he is," I replied, accepting the glass of wine Mom offered. The conversation during dinner was surreal. They talked about my generous heart and my family values as if I'd already signed the check. Dad launched into a speech about how this decision would bond us together as a family in ways that would last for generations. Mom got teary-eyed talking about how proud she was to have raised daughters who looked out for each other. Cordelia was the most animated I'd seen her in years, describing the house she wanted to buy, the wedding reception do-over she was planning, and the European honeymoon they'd had to postpone due to financial constraints. "This is honestly like winning the lottery ourselves," she laughed, apparently oblivious to the irony. When we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Dad finally brought out the paperwork he'd prepared. Bank routing numbers, transfer forms, even a document he'd drafted outlining the family agreement we were entering into. "Now," he said, spreading the papers across the coffee table, "we thought it would be best to handle this transfer in 2 parts. Half now and half in 6 months, just to make sure the tax implications are managed properly." I picked up the documents, pretending to read them carefully. "This is very thorough, Dad. You've really thought of everything." "Well, we want to make sure this is done right," Mom added. "No sense in losing money to unnecessary taxes or fees." "Absolutely," I agreed. "I actually have something I want to share with all of you before we sign anything." I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder I'd prepared. "I've been doing some thinking about family this week, and I realized there's a lot I don't know about our financial history. So I did some research." Dad's smile faltered slightly. "Research. I opened the folder and spread my own papers across the table. Bank records, mortgage documents, transaction histories, and screenshots of social media posts. I wanted to understand exactly how much this family has invested in each of us over the years. The room went very quiet. "Seraphina," Mom said carefully, "what exactly are you doing?" "I'm sharing information," I replied pleasantly. "For instance, did you know that over the past 7 years you've spent $287,000 on Cordelia's education and living expenses? That's almost half of my lottery win right there." Cordelia's face had gone pale. "Sarah, where did you get those numbers?" "Oh, I found Dad's very detailed records in his desk. Excellent bookkeeping, by the way." I pulled out another document. "I also discovered that 3 months ago you took out a $75,000 home equity loan supposedly for home improvements. But funny thing, the house looks exactly the same." Dad's jaw was working, but no words were coming out. "What I found even more interesting," I continued, "was that $65,000 of that loan money went directly to paying off Cordelia's student loans just 6 weeks ago, which makes all these conversations about her crushing debt somewhat confusing." "How dare you spy on this family?" Mom finally exploded. "How dare you violate our privacy and then sit here making accusations?" "Accusations." I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "Mom, I'm just sharing facts. Like the fact that Cordelia's been lying about her financial situation, or the fact that you've been lying about helping her, or the fact that all of you have been lying to me about why I should give up my lottery money." "That's not what this is about," Cordelia protested, but her voice was shaking. "No. Then what is it about?" I stood up, papers still in hand. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've already solved Cordelia's financial problems, but you still want my money. So, help me understand, what exactly do you need $310,000 for?" The silence stretched until Dad finally spoke. "You don't understand the full picture. Then explain it to me," I challenged. "Explain why my sister needs half my lottery win when her debts are already paid and she's making 6 figures. Explain why I should fund her house down payment and luxury lifestyle when she's been lying about struggling to pay basic expenses." "She's your sister," Mom said, as if that explained everything. "And you're my parents," I shot back. "But somehow that didn't stop you from spending 3 decades treating me like a second-class citizen in my own family." I pulled out more documents, the photos from my childhood bedroom, the text message screenshots, the evidence of systematic favoritism I'd been documenting. Did you know I kept every birthday card you ever sent me? Want to guess how many there were? 12. In 28 years. But I found 43 cards and letters from you to Cordelia, just in her college box. I was on a roll now, years of suppressed anger finally finding voice. I found the note in Mom's jewelry box about keeping emergency money for Cordelia's wedding, while making sure to tell me you were tapped out if I asked for anything. I found Dad's spreadsheets tracking every penny spent on the golden child, while my expenses didn't even warrant a folder. Seraphina, stop this, Dad said firmly, using his authoritative voice. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. Because you don't like having your behavior documented and analyzed. I gathered my papers and stood up. Well, here's what's going to happen next. I'm keeping my lottery money. All of it. And I'm cutting contact with this family because I finally understand what I'm worth to you people. You can't be serious, Cordelia whispered. Dead serious. But don't worry, I'm not leaving you empty-handed. I pulled out one final document. I've prepared a detailed accounting of every dollar this family has invested in each of us over our lifetimes. The total for Cordelia is $394,000. The total for me is $1,200, the cost of my high school graduation party. I placed the summary on the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. So here's my counter-offer. You want me to share my good fortune? Pay me back the $392,800 difference in family investment, and I'll happily split my lottery win down the middle. The explosion that followed was everything I'd expected and more. Accusations of selfishness, threats of disownment, tears from Mom about how I was destroying the family. Cordelia screamed that I was jealous and vindictive. Dad threatened to call the police, though, for what crime he couldn't articulate. Through it all, I stood calmly by the door, watching the masks finally slip away to reveal the people my family really were underneath their pretense of love and loyalty. When the shouting died down, I delivered my final statement. I want all of you to remember this moment, I said quietly. Because this is the moment you chose money over your daughter and sister. This is the moment you revealed that your love was conditional on my compliance, and your family values were really just manipulation tactics. I headed for the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Cordelia, that recording device I planted in this room last week. It captured some very interesting conversations about teaching me my place and making sure I never coast through life again. I think social media is going to find those recordings absolutely fascinating. The last thing I heard as I walked out was Mom screaming my name, but I didn't look back. My phone started ringing before I reached my car, and it didn't stop for the next 3 hours. But I was done listening. The next few months unfolded like the most satisfying revenge story you could imagine, and if you've stuck with me this far, you're about to see exactly why karma is real, and family toxicity never goes unpunished. First came the immediate aftermath. My family spent the week after our confrontation trying every manipulation tactic in their playbook. Mom called crying about how I was breaking her heart. Dad sent formal emails about legal obligations and family duties. Cordelia showed up at my apartment building demanding we talk like adults about my unreasonable behavior. But the most revealing moment came when Trevor, who supposedly couldn't attend Sunday dinner due to hospital emergencies, called me personally. He offered to mediate the family dispute and suggested we could find a middle ground where I gave them $200,000 instead of $310,000, as if that was some generous compromise. You do realize this makes you an accessory to their fraud, right? I asked him. Fraud, Sarah, this is just family disagreement. You're making this way more dramatic than it needs to be. Trevor, they lied about student loan debt that was already paid off. They took out a mortgage to fund Cordelia's lifestyle while claiming she was struggling. They attempted to defraud me of $310,000 based on fabricated financial hardship. In what world is that not fraud? The line went quiet for a long moment before he hung up. That's when I realized they'd made a critical error. They'd involved Trevor in their scheme, which meant their attempt to defraud me had crossed state lines. Cordelia and Trevor lived in Michigan, but their bank accounts and some financial transactions involved Illinois and Ohio. What had started as family manipulation was now potential federal wire fraud. My cousin Jake, the private investigator, helped me compile everything into a formal complaint. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit was very interested in my documentation of systematic deception, especially the recordings where my family explicitly discussed deceiving me about the financial situation. But the real justice came from an unexpected source: social media. Remember my friend Casey, the social media consultant? She'd been documenting everything for potential exposure, and when local news picked up the story of the Lottery family feud, Casey made sure they had access to the complete picture. The story went viral within 48 hours. Family demands half of daughter's lottery win for sister who doesn't need it became a trending topic on Reddit, TikTok, and Twitter. But it wasn't just the headline that captured attention, it was the detailed evidence I'd provided of 3 decades of systematic favoritism and the elaborate lies they'd constructed to justify their demands. The comments section was brutal and beautiful. Thousands of people shared their own stories of family favoritism, golden child dynamics, and financial manipulation. Child psychologists weighed in about the long-term effects of preferential treatment. Financial experts calculated the actual cost of my family's discrimination, but the most satisfying responses came from people who knew us personally. Former classmates shared stories about how my achievements were downplayed while Cordelia's were celebrated. Family friends admitted they'd noticed the differential treatment but hadn't known how to address it. Even some of my parents' neighbors commented about overhearing conversations where they bragged about Cordelia while barely mentioning my existence. The social media exposure led to local news interviews, which led to national attention. Within a month, I was being invited to speak at conferences about family trauma and financial boundaries. Publishers reached out about book deals. A documentary filmmaker wanted to explore systemic favoritism in American families. My parents and Cordelia, meanwhile, became local pariahs. Their church community distanced themselves after the recordings revealed the extent of their deception. Dad's business lost several major clients who didn't want to be associated with someone who would defraud his own daughter. Mom had to resign from her volunteer positions when organizations decided she couldn't be trusted with financial responsibilities. Cordelia faced the worst consequences. Her law firm launched an ethics investigation after discovering she'd been involved in attempting to defraud a family member. The State Bar Association opened their own inquiry. Several major clients specifically requested that she be removed from their cases. Trevor's medical career suffered too. The hospital where he was completing his residency questioned his character and integrity. His application for a fellowship position was withdrawn when the selection committee expressed concerns about his involvement in financial fraud. But here's the part that really satisfied my sense of justice. 6 months after our confrontation, Cordelia and Trevor filed for bankruptcy. Turns out their lifestyle had been completely unsustainable even with my parents' financial support. The $75,000 home equity loan had been just the latest in a series of bailouts. When the social media exposure destroyed their earning potential and my parents could no longer help financially, their house of cards collapsed. The luxury apartment, the designer clothes, the expensive dinners, the weekend trips, all of it had been funded by debt and family money they'd never been able to actually afford. Without continued financial support and facing reduced income due to their damaged reputations, they lost everything. My parents weren't much better off. The home equity loan payments, combined with the loss of Dad's business income, forced them to downsize to a small apartment. Mom had to take a part-time retail job at 58 years old. They stopped hosting family gatherings because they could no longer afford it. Meanwhile, I invested my lottery money wisely with Maria's help. The $620,000 became the foundation of a diversified portfolio that's now worth over $800,000. I bought a beautiful house, started my own dental hygiene consulting business, and established a scholarship fund for students from families who don't support their educational goals. I also created the Seraphina Foundation, which provides financial assistance and counseling services for people dealing with family financial manipulation and abuse. The foundation has helped over 200 people escape toxic family dynamics and build independent, stable lives. The most beautiful irony. Last month, I received a letter from Cordelia asking if I would consider providing a character reference for her bar association hearing. She wanted me to attest to her fundamental honesty and integrity, despite one mistake in judgment during a family disagreement. I sent back a copy of the recordings from that Sunday dinner with a note. I think these speak to your character more clearly than anything I could write. Looking back, winning that lottery was the best thing that ever happened to me, not because of the money, but because it finally revealed the truth about my family. For 28 years, I'd blamed myself for not being good enough to earn their love. I'd internalized their message that I was less valuable, less deserving, less important than my sister. But that lottery win proved something crucial. Their treatment of me had never been about my worth as a person. It had been about maintaining a hierarchy that served their needs and Cordelia's ambitions. When I finally had something they wanted, their true nature emerged, and it was uglier than I'd ever imagined. The money gave me freedom, but the truth gave me something more valuable, the knowledge that I was never the problem. They were. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced family favoritism or financial manipulation? Do you think I was right to expose my family's behavior? Or should I have handled this privately? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and standing up for yourself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and I love hearing your stories. If this resonated with you, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because I share more stories about family karma, justice served, and learning to value yourself even when your family doesn't. And here's something to think about. Sometimes the people who should love us unconditionally are the ones who hurt us most. But that says everything about them and nothing about our worth. Remember that. Protect your peace and never let anyone, family or otherwise, convince you that you deserve less than respect and genuine love. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that you're worthy of better treatment than my family gave me. Life has a funny way of balancing the scales, and sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and refusing to accept toxic behavior as normal. Share this with someone who needs to hear that family doesn't get to abuse you just because you share DNA, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll dive into more stories about justice, karma, and learning to put yourself first. Until then, remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, it's determined by how you treat yourself.